Son of the Demontser, 420 years before the escape. You're the only one I can trust, Kai said. The beautiful Trimerian woman sitting before him lowered her head and sighed. He had not seen her in so many years and was breathing every oath and was breaking every oath he had made in coming here. But the silent war he fought with Harask demanded he change his tactics, demanded he become a new person. Though Kai knew every Trimerian Knight had vowed never to seek this one woman, she was the only one that could help him. Riddle was his only hope. She looked up and smiled. What is this burden you wish for me to bear? You're a non-combatant, Kai said. In 120,000 years, I have never cast a spell or swung a sword, she said calmly. And so you would never be suspected. My enemy would never think I would leave such a powerful relic in your hands. See, I have to hide it. I cannot let him gain any enemies. I cannot leave this item in a place I found it, or it might be found by the traveling wanderer, or worse. What is it? I cannot say. He might be listening. All I can say is that I have to hide it, and Glimmer can never know you have it. I keep no secrets from Glimmer, she said. Kai could see the love she held for the man. Glimmer had so many enemies, and if they knew his only love lived, they would harm her. Her self-exile from her people and her isolation made her perfect for what he would ask her. He must never know. When I show it to you, it will become clear. Describing its power and its worth is impossible. Let me show you, and you will see its value. She nodded and smiled. Well, it is good to see him. And if you promise to stay long enough for dinner, a rest, and breakfast, then I will look at this thing you want me to hold for you and consider taking on this burden. Kai reached into the folds of his robe and pulled the throbbing, pulsing sphere from within. He grabbed it with his finger and his thumb and held it out to her. Open your third eye. Let me show you what this is. She opened the eye on her forehead. It was the color of pink crystal, perfect and beautiful. She held the object up to her. He held the object up to her. Its swirling green haze sparked and hissed as it moved in close. Her eye widened, and she opened her mouth to scream when black tendrils shot from the orb and reached into her eye socket. Kai's heart jumped, and he pulled away and sobbed. She screamed as the sour eye he had taken from Dudley's tower ripped from his hand and slammed into her eyeball. She grabbed it with both hands and fought to pull it free, and Kai heard a sickening pop as her eye burst. Instantly, he knew he'd made a mistake. He reached up to help her, and her eyeball and her nerve connecting it to her forehead sizzled to ash. The green orb sucked into her head with a pop, and she fell back, stunned and weeping silently. She stared up at the sky, and Kai looked down at the horror of what he had done. He cast spell after spell, fighting to free her socket of the sour eye, but to no avail. After he had cast on her for 2 hours, she began to seize from the influx of such powerful magics, and he pulled back. Her back snapped back and forth, her head flopped, and her eyes opened and rolled back in her head. She foamed at the mouth, and her arms twitched violently. Kai held her in his arms for what seemed like hours. Through his mind ran every memory he had ever shared with her, and all his love for this one woman raced through his body. He carried her to her home and set her gently on her bed. She had constructed a mural of Glimmer's face on the ceiling, and when he set her on the bed, he realized he could not meet his great teacher's gaze. He slunk off to a table and chair in the next room, buried his head in his hands, and sobbed. His heart ached for the abominable act he had committed, and he fought to remember why he thought this was a good idea. He did not sleep. He ran through what he should do, which was take her back to the Crystal Citadel to be seen to. But he knew he never could. He was alone in this horror. He could never ask another for help, and he wept and cursed himself and his rotten idea. He heard her wake, but did not go into her room. He waited, deciding to let her have some privacy. He waited for hours and heard her crying softly to herself. When she stepped out of the room, she looked to have been crying blood from her mundane eyes. Her eyelids were closed, and she held her fists out to her side. Blood ran down her arms from her grip, and tissue gripped from her finger with a squelch. Her eyelids were caked with blood, and Kai ran to her. He grabbed her by the sides of her head. Riddle, please speak to me. Riddle, say anything. His heart would not beat. His breath would not come. Her third eye kept closed when she spoke. I tore them out, but I can still see his movements. I can still see his atrocities. She opened her wet eyelids, and Kai pulled back in horror. She had ripped her eyes out. Her mouth opened in a great yawning sound of utter desolation and pain, and he knew this refrain, this sting his mind, would stain his mind forever. She threw him out. He left her grove, going deep into the forest on her remote mountain home, nestled in a different continent from Glimmer and her nation, and he waited. He watched her home for days from the gloom of the trees. He waited for any sign of her, and after 4 nights, then 5 days, she stepped out in the gloom. She wore no clothing. She had cleaned her face and wore bandages over the sockets where her eyes used to be. She opened her third eye, and he saw a sickly, infected green orb in her eye. She wailed as she stared up at the moons. Now I have become the keeper of horror. Now I have become the witness to evil. Hear me now, Kai, and hear me well. You are no longer beloved by me. You are now my oppressor. For I have seen the nightmares you thrust upon me before, and now I am their captive. Leave my grove and never tarry on this mountain again. Forget my name. Forget the love I once held for you, for now it is dead, and your name is a curse. Kai sobbed as he walked down the mountain and out of Riddle's life. He wept, knowing there was no recourse he could take to save her. There was no way to end her pain. When he reached the bottom of the mountain, he looked up at its heights and the cage he had forced upon his friend, and he knew Forgiveness would never be found, not from her, not from his side himself. 3 years before the escape, Kai shouldered up to the bar and waited for the bartender to acknowledge him. He waited for an hour as the tender watched him from the other side of the bar. There were no other patrons, but she did not trust him, so she watched. Kai's patience was wearing thin, and he tried to remind himself he had every moment of time at his command. But even though 2,000 years had passed, the memory of Riddle's wailing still echoed in his ears. He would never forget it, and he was beginning to feel a disdain for all other people as he fought to forgive himself. Finally, the tender stepped up to him and sneered in his direction. You're not welcome. This pub serves a certain clientele exclusively. You're not a member. Get out before I release my rage, she snapped. What rage? Kai said. He is right in there. She jerked her thumb at the door behind her. Big jaws, short temper. I'm not here for a drink. I need to see a man. I need to see the one who runs these streets. He doesn't take visitors. How can I find him? Kai said. He pulled a bag of gold out of his pouch and dropped it on the counter. He hoped it was from the right nation. He hoped it was from the right year with the right king emblazed on its face. She hefted the bag and rolled it in her hand and opened the pouch and stared. Go upstairs to room 9. Wait for him there. She shook her head. He doesn't like visitors. He's not going to like the look of you. It was the white robe. I need the key. Lock's broken. Just go in. Get comfortable. He'll find you. Up the creeping steps that bowed underfoot, through the hall with dry, brittle boards, he found room 9 and he entered. The bed was damp. The chair's cushions had been ripped or cut, and the stuffing exploded from within. The table had 2 short legs, 2 long legs, and the window was broken. The ceiling was low, and the entire room had a stink to it that turned Kai's stomach. He found the chair the least offensive piece of furniture, and he sat. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Then he looked at the ceiling, a roach crawling across it, and closed his eyes again. A smack knocked him from his chair, and he dropped to the floor. He reached for his sword, but with the swipe of a blade, his belt was cut, and his crystal sword kicked away. Over him stood a scowling beast of a Progetin with a tattoo across his cheek with a wolf's paw print. His hair was black, and he held a blade to Kai's throat. Don't know you, don't like you, the man grunted. He winked, and Kai felt a crawling fear coming over him. I am no enemy, Kai said. Shut the fuck up, the man whispered. I'll tell you if you're an enemy or not. He looked Kai over, and Kai felt dirty. He felt as if he would be sick. He felt the need to curl up to protect himself, and he had to remind himself he was used to being a Trimerian Knight and still had his magic. Give me your pouch. Take off your robe. The Progetin grinned, and Kai could see he missed many teeth. I'm going to step away and let you pick yourself up, but if you attack me, you won't make it out of this room or this city alive. Trallin is no place for enemies. For my enemies. The man pulled back, and Kai stuffed all his anger back and took off his robe. He dropped the bag he carried to the floor and stepped away. He looked at his sword across the room and noticed the man had put himself between Kai and it. You don't look like much, but you stink of magic, and I know old Trimerian when I see it. He motioned with his blade at the wall. Turn, face the wall. If you turn around, I'll kill you. Kai obeyed. He heard the man going through his belongings and had time to run through his mind what might be in there. However, the years were starting to pile up now, and Kai had traveled a lot In the thousands of years he'd been jumping time, he could not remember exactly what was in his bag and hoped the man would find nothing to anger him. Kai did not want to fight his way out of this room. He did not want to anger the man he had come to see. You can turn back around, the Brigantin said. My name is Hard Eye. I'll take you to my master, but I want you to look at this blade. The craftsmanship was shoddy and the blade a bit rusty. This is the blade that will kill you if you make a fuss. This is the blade that will carve you to bits right here. They walked deserted, blackened streets with little light and no warmth. It was summer, but this place seemed perpetually cold, and without his robe, Kai could feel the bite of the roads. He walked to the end of the alley. Open that grate, Hard Eye said. Kai opened the sewer grate and peered in. He could see nothing, and with a sudden impact, he was kicked in the hole. He flipped and landed on his feet with a splash of refuse and sewage. Hard Eye dropped in after him and shoved him down the tunnel before them. Kai walked slowly, his attention shifting from the walk before him and the man behind. The turns they took could not have been necessary, but he made them all anyway. And within a few minutes, Hard Eye's effect had been reached. Kai was hopelessly lost. They came to a great door set in the side of the wall, and Hard Eye kicked it in. Kai was shoved for the door and entered. The light was sudden and painful, the music slow and smoky. The room reeked of devilweed, and around him milled killers and thugs. Through the walking and stumbling mob, Kai saw the man he had come to talk to sitting at a table pressed against a blood-stained wall. He felt a shove hit his back from behind, and he made his way through the room until he stood before the man. He needed no introduction. Kai could only stare and wondered how many men, women, and children this fiend had killed. The massive Brigantin had a scar ripping across the left side of his neck that crossed the front and trailed down the collar to his shirt. His head was bald and tattooed with a dragon wrapping around the left side of his skull and a wolf snarling on the right. When Kai stopped at his table, the great brown wolf that was a legend in these streets sat up, its massive head looking across the table at him, and it snarled, its lip pulling back with a slight tremble. Peter of the Brown dropped a hand to its flank and stroked it. What did you find, Hard Eye? The man said. His voice was raspy and ragged, and scraped more than played on the air. It's the guy we were told about. Don't know what he wants. Can I sit? Kai said, motioning to the chairs. Peter shook his head very slowly as Hard Eye kicked each chair over on its side. Kai scowled at him and took a steadying breath, calming his anger. You're older than I expected, Kai said. My mother had me young. I need someone killed. It's a street tough. I'm no assassin. I'm a street tough. I'm no assassin, Peter said. I can't help you. Go to Rot and Bangle. There is a counting house there. You will find the voice for a man named Arundus Devanel. It is him you're wanting. You need a sly blade, not a clenched fist. The man pulled a bone from his plate and dropped it to the floor. The wolf pounced on it, and Peter wiped his hands on his pants. Kai opened the air around him and plucked 8 emeralds from within. They were each the size of Kai's thumb. And Peter's eyebrow lifted. Who's in a fortunate soul you want killed? Tarana Corlin, Kai said. Hard Eye grabbed Kai's shoulder and had a blade pressed to Kai's throat in a breath. Peter held up a hand. You want me to kill the favored daughter of my boss? He laughed, a ragged, terrifying sound that slapped the table. Man, when I turn you over, I'm going to be paid handsomely. I have 12 more gems like this one. and I can get you out of here and back to Tabor. Kai said, I know that is where you want to be. With money like I'm offering, you can buy a pardon and be with your people again. Peter the Brown stared, his eyes cutting into Kai's mind to look for a trick. Say I do it. Why would I be doing it? He said. I've looked into her future. There is a vital woman, a girl, little more, who I value. She will be a healer when she grows and the plague is coming. Toronto will capture and torture this girl and turn her into something dark. I want to save this young lady. Her fate. Let me slit his throat, Hard Eye said. Your father Stepan misses you, Kai said to Peter. You can mend bridges with your mother. You seem to know about a lot about me and my family, Peter said. He pulled a massive sword behind him and set it on the table. He tapped it with a finger and grinned at Sai. I look into the ones I would employ. Leave the emeralds in your hand. If I choose to do it, I will find you for the other 12. Now get out of here. I can smell magic on you. I know you can find your way out. You're not worried I will come back? Oh, stranger, if I do this for you, I will never return to this place, Peter said. Now get out of here before I loose my wolf on you. Kai heard the beast snarling and he turned. He cast a light to find his way out. It took him 4 hours to get to the sun. 37 years before the escape. Right where he didn't want to be. How they had let Kai in, he still didn't know. But now he stood in the vault, the section of the vault he did not want to be in. Any other utter black, he had no chance. So he pulled his sword and let it glow. It lit the area with a soft light. He saw hungry, horrible faces around him, and he reminded himself, no evil dwelled here. This was a place of light, even down here where the darkest of the sentinels lived. As his eyes adjusted to light, he saw the one he had come to see standing before him. The sentinel wore no clothing. He had the form of a child covered in soot and possessed no mouth. Kai did not know how to address this being. All his dealings with the sentinels had been with those of light, so he bowed and waited to be spoken. Why are you here? Kai heard echo in his head. Your chosen prophet, your chosen servant, the next of your prophets has been attacked, Kai said. I know this. She is dying, not yet 3, and the subject of attack from an unknown monster. She's been stabbed with a hellforged blade. She was not killed, but she will not heal without your touch, Kai said. She is too young for me to appear to, the Demontser said. She is but 3. If I go to her now, my frightful appearance will scar her and she will fear me. She's no good to me now. All I can do is avenge her. Though as hard as I search for the fiend that attacked her, I have not found her. And you won't. He is beyond you, Kai said. Her attack was my fault, and I wish to make it right. Explain, Kai heard in his head, the voice loud with anger and wrath. I asked her son to do something for me, and this villain who attacked her was trying to wipe her out, so her son will not commit the act I asked of him. She is but 3, and you met her son, the Demontser said. Kai's chosen lion was thin, but it was all he had. I met him in a dream. You're lying, but the lie does not smell foul, so I will let you keep your secret, the Demontser said. I will go to her, but she will scream when she sees me. She will not want to serve me when she grows older. I promise to guide her to you and soothe her fears, Kai said. Just please do this for me. Do this for Jocelyn. 34 years before the escape. Even though I stood before the Demontser, I knew he might be able to remove the eye to save Riddle's life and mine. I could not ask him. Though I hate myself for it, I could not chance him finding the sour eye. could not let any being, even such a good one, know of time travel. The implications are too immense. I'm beginning to think only Harask and I can bear this burden. The eye tells me the time is right. The Blestis will be attacked today. Harask has found her and knows of her daughter and the impact the girl will have on the world. He knows Drellis and Sabrar's daughter will save the world 10 times over and rise as the greatest leader Tamina has ever known. She will unite nations and heal old vendettas. She will defeat the darkness of Masculine when it rises, and she will usher in a time of peace. The daughter of the Blestis must be saved. The world depends on it. Harask knows of this. He has his army marching on her village now, and I cannot stay any longer. May any power that might be watching over me guard and protect Riddle. Her mountain home in Kark has her hidden well, but still a sensation gnaws at me that she's in danger. I cannot go to her, I cannot save her. Please, I beg of any god or soul that might be watching, please save her. I call out to you. I fear you do not exist. Kai closed his journal and tucked it under his desk. He cast his spells of invisibility on it and walked out of the room. He made for the door. He had miles to travel to get to Drellis' village, and Harask was so close. When he came to the door, he was met by the castle's caretaker. It was a gamble letting anyone get close to him, but the man's soul was pure, and Kai trusted him enough. Cholava Bentek met him at the great foyer and bowed. The man was slight with a balding head and a fine dress. He had been with Kai only 5 years, but he seemed to guess at Kai's needs before they came. He had held Kai's white robe out to him and his sword belt. The master will be leaving today, Bentek said. How long before he comes back? I may be gone a while, Cholava. I cannot guess when I will return, Kai said. It was nice. It was so nice to talk to someone. So nice to have a home to come to. For so long he had wandered before he built his citadel. Since he had made this place for himself, he had been more at rest. Well, master, please let's not forget about me. Let's try to come home as soon as possible. Kai knew years would go by before he came back, but he could not come back at this spot at this time. Cholava did not know of the sour eye. If he did, the temptations might overcome the simple man. I give you my word that no matter how long I am gone, I will not forget you. Kai smiled and hugged the man. He pulled back, looked his only companion in the eye, and felt himself warm. He stepped out the door and burst into flames. He lifted into the air as a great flaming brand and soared for Drellis. He had a life to save. Her village was in flames when he got there. He hit the ground in the square with such force. 7 of Harask's army was flash boiled in her own blood. Fire rushed out in every direction, and Kai pulled his sword as the dust smoke blew away. Harask's men stopped the slaughter, pausing to stare at him. Come to my blade and my sword, beast. Come and find death and pain. Kai watched them screw up their nerve and rushed them. He butchered Kai's harassed men for an hour before stepping out of the village and staring at 500 men Harask held in reserve. On his massive bare mount, Harask looked like a mountain. His brown cloak hid his bulging body, and his horrid stare burned into Kai. One gray eye, one sour green stared, and with a chop of his hand, 500 monsters surged forward. Kai stepped forward. He spun his blade down and lifted his voice in song. He stabbed the blade into the ground, and in every direction rushed a great wave of rainbow colors. It hit the world lurid. Every man it touched turned to solid crystal. 400 men instantly turned to crystal, and the other 100 or so screamed, threw down their weapons, and ran. Harask watched Kai slide his sword into his sheath, and Kai's magical song came to an end. Her ass kicked his bear, and it walked slowly down the hill. It wove its way through as many crystal men as it could before it stopped. And her ass looked at Kai and shook his head. My savior, her ass said. His voice was rumbling thunder. His voice was the booming of a volcano. Yes, I am the one who cut you free. I am the one who set you on this wretched path. Now I come to fight you. I am timeless, Harass snapped. As am I, Kai said. I've wondered who it was that moved against me for so long. Now you stand before me. Why do I not just slaughter you and leave you to rot and be eaten by carrion? Kai mentioned to the men around motions on men around all solid crystal, all the faces twisted and contorted in looks of agony. Why do you stay your blade? Kai said. When? Jocelyn, why did you not slit her throat and be done with it? Kai said. I never shine to murdering children. There's a bit of good in you. There's a flicker of compassion. I will find it in our war. I will heal your anger and cool your rage for mankind. So we are to be friends then, Harask said. I think I would rather take my chance at killing you. Never friends, but I can give up on you. I can't give up on you just yet. I want the girl who lives in this village. Give me Drellis, Harask said. I cannot do that. This one I have won. Maybe the next battle belongs to you. Once a win has come to one, the other must find a different way. So there are rules to this silent war we fight. There are. You and I will not meet again, Harask said. I cannot guarantee that. Harask was afraid. Kai knew that now. Harask would see his mistake in showing fear soon. Maybe not now. He turned his bear and rolled away. My men will suffer greatly for fleeing the battle. I would have mercy. They have no answer for me, Kai said. When Harask was gone, Kai turned to the village. Every one of the citizens had been slaughtered, save her. He could feel her pure heart pounding and had only to follow its shine. A moment before he entered the doorway that would show him, he decided to hide himself. He cast a platinum cap on his head, his hair white and short, his robe he colored with shimmering reds and purples, and warped his sword into a staff with the head of an anaconda on top. Drellis, do not fear me. I have come to aid you and make you strong. Please let yourself be seen, and I will guide you and keep you safe. We will go to a place where no enemy can find you, and I will teach you power. Silence, save the crackle of flame. And as the sun began to set, she came around the corner. Her face was smeared with blood and soot that had cut a path down her chin. Her tears trembled in her eyes, and her terrified voice cracked when she spoke. What do I call you? She asked. Call me master, for I will teach you to be strong. Okay, so that's the reading we're gonna decode tonight. Is Son of the Demontser. There's so much there to look at. It's outrageous. However, first, the pocket square. Gray squares on a black background. This is your pocket square for tonight. I want you to appreciate the fact that I took a lot of time trying to figure out how to fold this. And by a lot of time, I mean somewhere around 15 to 30 seconds. Okay, I'm not sure if this blue vest matches this army green shirt. What I will tell you about this army green shirt, and I'm going to throw in pictures, is that this is the Avengers, and it is the most grimdark gruesome picture of the Avengers I have ever seen. You can see that Thor's not happy. Iron Man is pretty gruesome. Looks focused. But the Hulk is what stands out to me. He looks, he's bigger than I've seen him before, and he looks almost simian, almost ape-like. Okay, so that's me today. Now, last week I showed you a series of pictures and a video. So let's go over the pictures first and then the video. Okay, you saw an image of a bunch of boxes, all stacked up on each other and all lined up. There were 5 across, 4 down, and then 3 on the bottom. That is the map for the second act. Across, you have the series. Down, you have a certain event. And then the events goes through all 4 books. So when you read the first book of the first series, you get a small look of the event. Second book of the first series, you get a closer view of the event that was going on while you were during the first book. This goes all the way down until by the time you get to the 4th book, you have seen the entire event. There's also other things trapped in there, other things that we see that have nothing to do with that event. This carries through all the way so that you have event, all that kind of stuff. Right now, I have 5 events planned. 5 events that will tell the story of the second act. It is daunting. I don't think you'll be able to truly understand how intricate it is until it's out. And the thing is, it won't be out for a very long time. I'm looking at the picture now, and I can tell you that book 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 are completed. Book 2 of series 1 is done. 3, 4, 2, 3, and 4, the event is done, but all the filler in the middle has to be written. I'm really worried about the 3rd event. It's going to be really intense and spark a really big part of the second act. I don't want to talk about the 3 books of the 5th series. Those 3 books of the 5th series start on the 3rd act instead of 1 and 2. None of this makes sense to you. Maybe if you go back and stare at the picture that I showed, maybe you'll be able to make some sense of this. The reason that I showed it was because I wanted to show you how intricate the second act really is. But basically what it comes down to is we have a grid of 5 and 4. And you can read them 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's all up to you. If I can pull this off, it's possible that this will be studied for a very long time. But we have to see if I can really pull it off. Okay. The next picture was a gas can. Okay, so let's, this needs to be here. So let's talk about the gas can. Okay, Shadow wanted a gas can because a lot of his imagery is tied into gasoline because he was created with a event that was tied in with gasoline. We actually went to a flea market and we found this and a different can. And my wife thought to herself as soon as she saw this, I hope he buys it. I have a tendency to see something that I really want and not buy it. And then like 5 hours later, I'm like, man, I really wish I had bought that. And then a day later, man, wouldn't it be cool if I had bought that thing? I wish I'd bought that. And this goes on for days and days and days until finally we go back and actually buy the thing. So when she saw this gas can, she was thinking to herself, man, I really hope he buys that because I'm not looking forward to going through the whole rigmarole. So that is Shadow's gas can. And it's just, it doesn't have gas in it. It's purely decorative. But when he looks at it, when Shadow looks at that gas can, there's a feeling that he gets that's hard to explain. It's not a feeling of coming home. It's not a feeling of being understood. I guess he would have to explain to you what it feels like to look at that gas can. All right, you saw a picture of a small statuette of a woman sitting on a chair. She's in blue. She has an odd hat on her head, and she's very beautiful. That is the Dragon Queen. That is Ember right there. She's sitting here, not far. She's on the other side of the chair that Jordai is sitting on. There's a table there, and there she sits. I can't write a book without her staring at me the whole time I do it. Why, I don't understand. But when she's staring at me, it allows me to write. I've tried to write without her, it never works out. She has to be looking at me and she has to be judging me because she's an authority. It's weird, I know. It's just a small piece of magic from my office. And you got to see her last video. Okay, there was also a video of me standing. You got the head's cut off and the legs are cut off, and all you can see is this leather vest. It's a very cool leather vest. It is designed to look like a classic leather jacket, only vest-like. It doesn't have the belt that's supposed to go around a leather jacket. However, it does have everything else. I bought this for myself when I found out that Bramble was my father. But the man that I had told was my father, I had been told was my father wasn't. And that a man that could have been a great father figure for me was actually my father. This is I don't want to call it a trophy. I can't call it a gift from him, but it's something that I allowed myself to buy because of him. Now, we got it on clearance. And when I say on clearance, I really mean on clearance. We paid $190 for it, which I thought was kind of steep. And I was like, maybe we shouldn't buy this. This is really too much. When it got to us and we saw the actual price tag, it was $795 vest. Clearance does not describe what this vest actually is. So that is my bramble vest. Okay. You saw 2 coffee cups. One had a red diamond on it. Above it, a line representing a mountain, and a fist. That is the symbol of the Red Fist clan. We actually made these cups based on the work that I was writing at the time. I was writing a lot of Red Fist stuff from the mountain. It's not going to come out for years. And this was something that Becca designed. She drew the hand, she drew the fist, drew the mountain, all that kind of stuff. She designed the whole thing. The blue one, also a diamond. It also has the mountain, and then it has this weird kind of, it almost looks like, well, what it is it's a rounded, it's the top of a rounded shield. That is the symbol of the Steel Fist clan. What you don't know, and what you won't know until the book comes out, is that there's a character named Burl Steeltooth that is incredibly devoted to his wife. I've never seen anything like it. And that cup was designed for as kind of a statement of love for my wife. And yeah, so those are my 2 mugs. I wish at the end to have 7 of them for the 7 major families, but we will see. Okay, there's something weird here. There was an image of a lamp. In the middle of that lamp was a circular, like a wreath of flowers. I don't know where that came from. What I can say is that in the mail, I got this wreath. Now, it was not from Amazon. This was not an accidental click in shipping. This box came from an actual place outside of the state. And it was sent to me with my name on it and my address. This came after Teardrop was released. As I look at it and I think about it, I think maybe this was a gift from someone who had read one of my books. There is nobody. There was no message inside that said who it was from. It was just a wreath of flowers that was sent to me. And I didn't know what to think of it at first. For a while, it just sat. Once I put it down and I put the lamp in the middle of it, a halo of light surrounded the wreath. And I really started to think about that wreath and where it might have come from. all reasonable thought, all logic says that this was sent to me by a stranger. It was sent to me by a stranger that refused to name themselves. I think this was a gift from a fan. And I don't want to say fan. And I don't want to use the word admirer. I guess what I want to say is that I believe this wreath was sent to me by somebody who was touched by my work. That's what we're going to say about it. At first, I thought it was weird, didn't really fit. For weeks, maybe months, it just kind of sat in its box. And then when I placed it and the light of the lamp lit on it, I started thinking about where it was from. And I started to get an idea that maybe this was sent to me by somebody who is touched by my work. It's very important to me. I'll have this for the rest of my life. If the person that sent it to me is watching, I want to say I'm very touched that they would take the time, you would take the time to pick this out for me. And I have found an honored place where it is lit and surrounded by a halo of light. You have given me something that I will treasure for the rest of my life. Okay. Then there was a video. The video showed 3 hats. One was a black hat. It's actually a Stetson. It was very expensive. Way too expensive for me to buy, but I needed one. We were going to the Grand Canyon the next day. It was going to be very sunny. It was going to be very hot. I needed a hat. And I had forgotten all my hats. At the time, I was completely bald. And I would have burned. So I bought that hat. It has been claimed by Assassin. That is his hat now. Nobody's allowed to wear it. Except I did wear it in the the series finale of the last series. I wore that hat. I also, by the way, wore the black leather vest. Camera goes up and it shows you another hat. This hat is like a khaki color. It's actually it is canvas. And it's a kind of hat that is made from canvas that was used as a tarp for driving up and down Central America with coffee beans. If you watch the movie Zombieland, Woody Harrelson's character has this exact kind of hat. Cool thing about this hat is that it's completely flat, but it has a wire that goes through the brim, and you can shape it in any way you want. Um, Woody Harrelson basically grabbed it and did like this and created like, you know. Anyway, um, think about the gas can. This was one of those things that I saw, tried on, it fit, I loved, and for 5 days I talked about how much I wished that I had bought it. We were in a touristy area. There was a mall of some sort that had this hat. I tried it on, I talked about it, and I talked about it for 5 days, and my wife had to listen to that. And then we found ourselves in that same mall on the 5th day. Walking around the area, we went back into that store, and there sat the hat. And I looked at it and I tried it on, and I was like, well, and I started to put it back, and she's like, no, you're buying the fucking hat. We're not going to do this. So anyway, I got it. I didn't shape it. I kept it as flat as I could. It's canvas. It's a very strong, like tough canvas. There's a couple of patches in it, covering up holes. And I call it my celebration hat. I wear it anytime that I have completed a book, anytime that I have completed any great feat. And it is the hat that I wear to the Goat Festival when I play my Goats of Brestian song that I wrote. Then you went across and you saw a picture, very it was a picture that was very much like Greek statues of a woman and a man leaning forward almost as if to kiss each other. Now we're talking about the autobiography. We've shifted gears and we're talking about the autobiography. At one point, I am on disability. Disability, at a certain point, you stop being able to work. And then you file all the papers, and for a while, you're just in destitute poverty. And then disability kicks in, and when they do, they pay you all that they would have paid you to the point where you started not being able to work. When I got that sum of money dropped on me, I bought a present for everybody that was in my life at that time, including Siren, Red, Lean, Fish, and Becca. With Becca, I took her to a store in a mall, and I showed her that picture. And I bought it for her, and I had it professionally framed, and I had it sealed so that no air could get in it, which means no moisture. Altogether, putting that picture together was like a $400 project, and I just gave it to her. We weren't dating at the time. Her and I haven't talked in detail about the picture. We know how much we love it. But my hope was that during that time when I was not dating anybody, but that Siren was in my life every day, all day. My hope was that that particular picture that I had chosen for her gave her hope enough to stay a little bit longer. So that's what the picture was. The video also moved on to a leather hat sitting on, hanging on the wall. This is Simon Bard's hat. Simon Bard is a character from my world. He is a traveling storyteller, an immortal traveling storyteller. And we bought the hat at the Lake of the Ozarks. And I wasn't happy with it. So I took like a brown twine, and I braided it all together, which was not easy. And I created a long strip of braided cord, and then I sewed it into the leather hat. I had to buy a specific kind of leather, kind of needle. I had to push really hard, but I managed to get the cord around the brim. I ran into a problem when I got to the back because I had no way of fastening it. So there used to be a store here in town that only sold beads. There was beads of all sorts, and I happened to find this one really weird bead, and I don't know what it would be used for, but it was rectangular. It was a little bit wider than a quarter, and it had a big rectangular circle in the middle. And I used that as the fastener for the twine braid that went around it. Then I tied all the twine in a big knot, and it's just worked ever since. Now, if you watched the video, that was the finale of last season, you saw that that was the hat that Becca was wearing. She was wearing Simon Bard's hat. We wanted kind of a good guy and a bad guy kind of feel to the entire episode. So she wore a brown hat and she had a kind of glow to her. I was in a completely dark room, lit only by my second screen, that had what I was reading on top of it. So I was in the black leather vest with the black hat that's Assassin's hat. And I was reading. She was in bright colored clothes with Simon Bard's hat. And there was a kind of a golden glow around her. There was an obvious good guy and an obvious bad guy in the climax of that video. The video is 3 hours long. I can completely understand if you guys completely skip by it. The thing that I will say is that she was reading poems, reciting poems that nobody has heard and nobody will hear for like 4 years. I was reading chapters from books that nobody will hear and nobody will be able to read for 5 years, 6 years. That climax video is it's a glimpse into the future. There's things about my work that you'll recognize that's already come out. And it would not be a bad idea to go back and actually sit through it. So if you were daunted by the fact that it was 3 hours long, the incentive that I would give for you to go back to the climax of last season, the incentive that I would give you is that this is work nobody has seen. And this is work that will not be shown to the public for half a decade. So that's why the climax of last season is important. The other thing is, all the music that I have on my channel is bass music that I play on my guitar. The guy who plays it is an alter named Benny. And the showdown music is from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And it actually goes bum, 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 bum. So she looks it up, she writes down all the notes. Benny gets his guitar. He sits down, looks at the notes. She has to let one of the dogs outside. So she walks halfway through the house, lets that dog outside, comes back into the room, and Benny has mastered the song. So you're used to hearing it as like kind of a whistle that's really high pitched, but if you listen to the bass between segments of the show, you'll find that he's actually on the bass, he's playing the classic showdown, high noon, I've got 2 revolvers, you got 2 revolvers, and one of us is not walking away from this alive. He is playing that song. So that's what you saw in the last video. I'm gonna put that there, let you look at that, and we'll get back to decoding the son of the Demontser when I come back. Thank you. Okay, so let's really get into it. Let's tear open Son of the Demontser, because it has a lot to do with the Madness Wars, and it has a lot to do with other books that I've written. Okay. I don't think I've addressed this in a while. It was probably my second video in the first season, so it hasn't been addressed in a while, but my stomach is always so upset and churning because of the intricate work that I do, that it's always bubbling up, and I have a tendency to burp a lot. It's gross, I know. You have to deal with it. I have to deal with it every day, all day. So accept my apologies for it. I've done okay in this video, but in videos past and in videos coming up, I will be doing a lot of that. So okay. This is 420 years before the escape. This is the beginning of what I read you. Kai has gone to a woman named Riddle. Now, okay, there was a first age of humans. Those humans existed, everything was fine. And then the God Wars happened. When the God War happened, gods were dropping from the sky, dead or dying, and they hit the ground, and their blood soaked under the ground. But as it was doing so, it warped and changed the humans in that area. This is where you get the different races. Every race in my world that's not human can be traced back to a god that fell in that area. Or in the case of the first tree, it can be the people of the forest of the first tree can be traced back to the magic that came from the first tree. But we're not talking about that right now. Let's talk for a second about the country Abu. I'm going to show you the map right now. Abu, the god that died in Abu, was a god with 3 eyes. He was very spiritual, and he was a healer. He had a wife. We'll deal with her later. But he had a wife, and he spent all of his time walking around battlefields healing people. Well, he died in Abu. And when he did, he changed the people into a race similar to what he was. This is where you get the Trimerian race. There were 4 people that were sitting on a cliff that saw him die. One was named Glimmer, one was named Taiga, the other is in the book, and in the story of the slave that we talked about, and then there was Riddle. When Riddle saw them, she was Taiga's sister, and Glimmer loved her. Riddle watched this god die, and she was not strong, she was not powerful, she was just somebody they loved. And basically, Taiga and Glimmer decided they were going to create a group of people powerful enough to protect Riddle. They put her in a cave, and slowly those 2 men and the girl with them, the third one, created more and more powerful people, and they ended up creating the Trimerian Knights. So the Trimerian Knights were created because a man in love wanted to protect the person he was in love with, and he happened to be friends with the brother, and the brother wanted to protect her too. When the God War ended, Riddle, Glimmer, Tai, they had so many enemies that they decided the best thing to do was to hide Riddle. And they sent her off into the mountains in a nation called Kark. That's all I can tell you for now. I know more than that, but you would not enjoy hearing all of it because it's coming. It's all coming. 420 years before the escape, Kai goes to Riddle, and he has taken from the slave, if you read the slave, he has taken the orb that was the Eye of Harask that's missing. He had taken it and he had shrunken it down to the size of an actual eye, and he needed to hide it somewhere. And the only person that was hidden well enough was Riddle. No one had an idea where she was. So he went to her. He thought, if I could give this to Riddle, then I can keep it safe and keep it hidden because nobody knows where she is. Nobody knows to even look for where she is, and he can hide it from Harask. Now, the reason he needed to hide it from Harask is if Harask can get to it, he can get an ally. 2 people working for Harask against Kai. Kai has to hide this thing. So Kai goes to Riddle. He thinks he can put it in her third eye and everything will be fine. But the reality is that orb shrunk down to the size of an eye is so evil. Kai didn't really truly understand. Now, if you realize, Kai is actually talking in this story. All the way through the story, he's talking. So this story takes place before the Banshee, before he's cursed with the voice of a Banshee and he can't speak. Kai is actually talking in this. So that happens before this. Okay. So Kai tries to put the eye inside Riddle. And she gets it. And when she does, she sees all the horrible things that Harask is doing. And she can't stop seeing them. They're happening constantly. She is constantly tormented with what he's doing. He's doing all kinds of horrible things that have horrible impacts on the world around him. And she just drops. She drops screaming. Kai realizes what he's done. He casts spells on her to try to pull it out of her. Now, Kai is Taiga's son. Taiga dates back to 120,000 years before all of this. So Kai's pretty old and he's learned a lot of different magics. And as he's casting all of those magics, extensively trying to get this eye out of her, he realizes that it's just going to be a part of her life. He's not supposed to be here in the first place. When he became a Trimerian Knight, he took an oath to never go and see Riddle. The first wave and the second wave of Trimerian Knights all took that oath. The third never knew about Riddle. So Kai has broken his oath of never coming to see Riddle. She's trapped with it. She passes out. He puts her in bed, can't sleep, wandering around our house, freaking out, trying to figure out what he's going to do to fix this mistake he's made. And he hears her wake up. He hears her cry. And she comes out with an eyeball in each hand. She's ripped her eyes out because she thinks if she can take her eyes out, she'll stop seeing the images. She's ripped her eyes out. Pretty horrific. She throws him out. He waits there to try to see if there's something he can do. And she comes out into her little area there where she will grow a garden and keep it and all that kind of stuff. She's blind now, except for the deeds of Harask and what will become the deeds of Kai. She's blind now, and she just tells him to leave and never come back. Now, if you go back to the book Crown, at the very end, there is a knighting. We talked about it earlier in this. We talked about it in the last video. The knighting of Rafe Ivyfist. Rafe Ivyfist takes over the group that Glimmer has spent 120,000 years leading. He's now been replaced by Rafe. He knights Rafe, He gives Rafe the sword, and then he goes over to a crowd of people, and there's a woman there. Her eyes are bandaged, her third eye closed, and Glimmer walks over to her. He doesn't say a word to anybody. He takes her, puts his arms around her, and they vanish in a flash of light. We never know who she is. We never know why Glimmer does that. We never know what happens to Glimmer afterwards. But this is the woman. Riddle is the woman that Glimmer took off with. So we have that. That is the first section of the Son of the Demontser. Then we go to 3 years before the escape. Last was 420 years before the escape. Now 3 years before the escape, and Kai is still talking. So we still haven't reached the Banshee. The Banshee takes place. Well, the Banshee takes. Let me look and find the story of the Banshee, and I'm gonna tell you when the Banshee takes place, because it is not at this point. Let's see. I can find it. Okay, I'm getting there. The Banshee. The Banshee takes place 24 years before the escape. This is 3 years before the escape, and Kai's still talking. So we start to see the effects of the time travel. Nothing makes sense. Later in other stories, he'll be talking when he's not supposed to be, when the timeline tells him he's not supposed to be. And that's part of it. There'll be stories in the future where Kai's not talking, then he's talking, then he's not talking. There's so much time travel in here, and there's so many lines being crossed and knots being tied that it's impossible. But what we do know is that at some point, Kai loses his voice. In our last video, you saw him with his scroll, speaking with his magical scroll. That was 16 years after the escape. This is 3 years before the escape. We're starting to see, you guys understand what I'm saying. First, he goes to a bar that he is not welcome in because what Kai is told is he doesn't take visitors. Okay, there is a power in this area that controls this bar, and that person doesn't take. And Kai says, how can I find him? And he pulls out a bag of gold. In these situations, a bag of gold is always going to work. So she tells him to go to a room. He wants a key. The door doesn't have a lock. This is the kind of shamble of a room that we're looking at. The bed is wet. The chairs are ripped up and torn. All this kind of stuff. And there's nothing. There's a point here where it says, it was the white robe. The bartender says he's not going to like the look of you. And then the next line is, it was the white robe. Now, in The Slave, Kai is wearing a white robe. In the Banshee, before he loses his voice, he's wearing the white robe. And then when he talks to Riddle, he's wearing a white robe. After Riddle, he stops wearing the white robe and he goes to black. Anyway, we move in and we find a hard eye. Now, in the book Legends of Exiles, there is a character named Welter. He ends up marrying another character named Rachel. There's this really great scene that I haven't written yet, where it's a fight scene, and Welter is fighting side by side with his wife. And a man reaches his sword arm out like this, and an arrow goes through his bicep. It goes through his bicep and into Welter's eye. But it was slowed down so much by the bicep that when it hit the eye, it didn't kill him. There's this cool, okay, so an archer hits from over here. It goes in the eye. Rachel reaches over, grabs the arrow from the eye that still has the eye of her husband on it, and she releases the arrow, killing the archer. Welter doesn't have an eye anymore, and he keeps fighting. That's how Welter lost his eye. And from that moment on, he is called Welter Hard Eye. That's just the name he is given. She becomes Rachel Hard Eye. If you watch the climactic video from the season before, you know that there is a girl called Wilden Hard Eye that is Welter's daughter. The Hard Eye family becomes a big thing. You can even see the Hard Eye family in the book that's coming out. It's a novella, and it's actually coming out February 15th, and it's called Seeds of Revenge. It's from a new series that I'm releasing that's all novellas. It's called Seeds of Revenge. It'll come out February 15th. Cool thing about the cover is that the eye itself that you can see that's closed, the eyelid, I actually drew that. Trying to learn how to draw. I've been drawing just this character, and I drew that. We color it red and we put it on the cover. The rest of the cover, we just slapped it together. Slapped makes it seem like we didn't pay attention. We carefully put it together. Anyway, there's a Hard Eye, a son of Welter and Rachel, in that novella. Here we see another Hard Eye, a darker Hard Eye, who doesn't ever give his name. I think it's Bal. I think it's the same Hard Eye. I think it's Balix, but we never see his name. We do find out that this takes place in the city Trollan. Trollan is a city from the Madness Wars, and it is run. The noble that runs it, his name is Bruda Corlin. Bruda Corlin runs his city, and he runs the underground of his city. So he is both the nobleman that is in charge of this area by law, and he is the most powerful criminal in the city. So this is Trollan, and in Trollan is the son of the Demontser. Okay, so Hard Eye comes in, smacks Kai around. Kai can easily destroy the Hard Eye, but he's trying to get to the son of the Demontser. And he lets himself be taken. The Hard Eye takes him into the sewers, and he ends up coming up into the face of Peter of the Brown. Now, this is where things get crazy. Peter Redfist is the son of Jocelyn and Flack Redfist. Peter Redfist is the son of Jocelyn and Flack Redfist. Jocelyn is the servant of a powerful sentinel called the Blestis. And as the Blestis, she gives birth to a powerful person that's able to save the world, and that's Peter Redfist. However, Jocelyn's not supposed to be the Blestis. We find out later in this story, Drellis is supposed to be the Blestis. Well, this is a future in which Jocelyn actually was the Demontser instead of the Blestis. There's the two people. There's the Demontser, which is kind of a dark servant of the Sentinels, and then there's the Blestis, which is a light servant of the Sentinels. Jocelyn was supposed to be a servant of the Blestis. Was supposed to be a servant of the Demontser. This is what would have come of her son, Peter the Brown. This is supposed to be the real story. Peter the Brown is supposed to be a criminal. Peter Redfist in the books is what we end up with. Okay, he's called Peter the Brown because his wolf is brown. His father is a guy named Stepan. Stepan is a Fendi. They're tied to wolves. So every male warrior gets tied to a wolf. Peter is tied to the brown wolf that's in this book. In the book Legends of the Exiles, Jocelyn is in love with Stepan. He's much older than her. Their story begins as him protecting her, but as they get older, he falls in love with her and she falls in love with him. Okay, that's who she was supposed to marry. We're going to get into why that didn't happen, but she was supposed to marry Stepan, and if she had, Peter would have been a Fendi and he would have had this brown. Okay, so Kai wants Peter, who is a powerful Peter is a powerful criminal underboss under Bruta. And Kai wants Peter to kill a woman named Tirana. Tirana is Bruta Corlin's daughter. The reason Kai wants her dead is because of all the dark shit she does in the Madness Wars. He's trying to stop all that from happening. So he goes to Peter to try to get Peter to kill Tirana. He knows he can do it. And Kai tries to manipulate him into doing that. Peter says, "I'm a street tough, I'm no assassin." But Kai's still betting on Peter. Then Kai says, "Your father Stepan misses you. You can mend bridges with your mother." Now we're talking about something we're never going to know about. I'm never going to write that story because this is a what if. I'm never going to write that story. But in this, Peter has done something so terrible that his mother throws him away. And his father Stephen misses him. Peter says, "You seem to know a lot about me and my family." Kai knows a lot about everything, but basically, he is taunting Peter. He is saying, "Do this for me. I'll give you the money to get out of the situation you're in right now. Go back to Tagore, make up with your mother, and be with your father," which, Peter's willing to do. So that is the beginning, the son of the Demontser. Now, let's take a minute and talk about why Peter is this way in this short story. In this short story, Jocelyn is the servant of the Demontser. At an age where she could handle it, 6, 5, she was introduced to the Demontser. The Demontser was a young boy with no clothes, very dark, with no mouth. And he became, in this story, he became the one she served. Because when she saw him for the first time, she wasn't afraid of him. And so she becomes a servant of the Demontser. And the person who's supposed to be the servant of the Blestis becomes a servant of the Blestis, and that's Drellis. However, Harask cuts Jocelyn when she's 3, way too old, way too young to see an image of the Demontser. Well, the Demontser has to come to her. Kai talks to him. The Demontser has to come to her and heal her. And when he does, she's 3. She sees him. She's afraid of him. So in Legends of the Exiles, she's terrified of this boy that keeps showing up around her. She's terrified. She hides every time. She's horrified by him. And she has no idea why he keeps coming before her. She becomes friends with Drellis. They become best friends. And when they are finally brought before the Sentinels, Jocelyn sees the Demontser and is terrified of him. And Drellis sees the Blestis, and she's supposed to go to him. But because she loves Jocelyn so much, they switch places. When they switch places, Drellis goes to the Demontser, and she becomes kind of evil, but working on the side of good. And Jocelyn becomes the member of the Blestis. Now we're into a lot of what ifs and backstories. Okay. This story ends with Kai taking the place, making himself look like a character called the Master. And he saves Drellis's life. He then goes to Jocelyn and he brings them together and he prepares them to see the gods they're going to serve, the Demontser and the Blestis. And they become friends while they're doing it. Now, if Harask had not stabbed Jocelyn, she would have seen the Demontser at the time when she was supposed to, and she would not have been afraid of him. When she saw him and dedicated herself to him, she would have been okay with that. At that point, she would have come down and she would have been able to marry Stephen, the man she loved. And Peter of the Brown is what we would have gotten. However, she was so horrified because she saw the Demontser at such a young age that Drellis took her place and she became the Blestis. As the Blessed, she was told she had to give birth to a great and powerful person. So she went looking for a great and powerful man, and Stepan was the one she loved, but Stepan was not the best candidate. And so she walked away from love and she ended up with Flack Redfist. Flack Redfist gave her Peter. Okay. Now, if you've read any of my work, you know that Peter's awesome. He's fantastic. He is a great leader. He's a great mind. He's a great fighter. He is everything you want in a badass, in a heroic badass. And that is the product of the Blestis and Flack Redfist. However, he was second choice. Again, just like in the last video, Jordai Stonefist was second choice. It was supposed to be Kel and Justine that had the child that would serve as advisor for Peter, but Harask stopped that. And the second choice ended up being Jordai. I talked in the last video about what would have happened if it was actually Kel and Justine's kid that was the advisor, the Bastet for Peter. We'll never know, but it would have been better. Jordai is second place. So all the things that Jordai does, I want you to think about for a minute. If you've read all the work, I want you to think about for a minute all the things that Jordai does and how much better it could be if the first choice, Kel and Justine's son, had actually been Peter's Bastet. We have a similar situation here. Drellis was supposed to get together with a character named Sabrar, and they were supposed to have a daughter when she was the Blestis. Their daughter was supposed to bring peace to countries, bring peace to continents, bring peace to the world. Their daughter, the daughter of Drellis and the daughter of Sabrar, was supposed to be the most powerful and most calming force in the world. She was supposed to save the world. But in order for that to happen, Drellis had to be the Blesses. And she had to mind up with Sabrar. When the two girls came before the Blesses and the Demontser, and Jocelyn was so terrified of the Demontser because she had been cut, Drellis took her place. In doing that, we lose the girl that Drellis and Sabrar were going to have, and we lose that powerful peacemaking entity. And what we get is Peter. So actually, Peter is second choice again. Never going to be as powerful as Drellis and Sabrar's child was supposed to be. Never going to be as important. Never going to accomplish the things he was supposed to be. All because Jocelyn was too scared to become the Demontser, so that Drellis could become the Blestis. And the reason Jocelyn was so scared was because of Harask. Now, there is a section here. Even though I stood before the Demontser, I knew he might be able to remove the eye and save Riddle's life. I could not ask him. What you don't know is that the reason that I played the music, the background music during that particular point, is because all of this is in italics. This is all being written in a journal, okay? A journal that you saw Kai hide under his desk and also turn invisible. Then Kai starts talking to a guy named Cholava Bentek. If you remember from the earlier video, Cholava Bentek is the skull that Kai is given. So Kai leaves in this story to go off and fight Harask. At that point, he has a castle, but there's so many moving parts, and there's so many crossing lines, and there's so many what if and if I that Kai forgets to go home. He forgets to go home for so many years that he forgets who Cholava Bentek even is. You probably don't see it. You might see it, but you probably don't see it. So I'm going to show it to you. In the story Gilded Mares, Harask hands a blackened, jagged skull that's still wet to Kai. And he says that his name is Cholava Bentek. Kai, by this time, has forgotten that name. So he doesn't know who that is. If Harask got that skull and it's still wet, that means he killed him recently. That means he went back in time. And that means he found Kai's citadel. And if he found Kai's citadel and he killed the man in charge of it, then he had free reign to look for and do anything he possibly could in that citadel. He could search it from top to bottom. Now let's go back to the first words written in this journal. Even though I stood before the Demontser, I knew he might be able to remove the eye and save Riddle's life and mind. I could not ask him. If Harask searched that entire area, he's a time traveling wizard. Time is all he has. If he searched that entire area, it is possible he found that journal. If he found that journal, he knows that the eye is in a person named Riddle's head. Save her life and mind. He knows Riddle has the eye. This means that at this point in the story, Harask, at the skull is so wet, I guess. So at the Gilded Mare's point of the story, it's possible he has gone to that citadel, killed that man, just come back from killing that man. And while he sits in the booth in the Gilded Mare's story, he has in his possession the journal that Kai kept. If that's the case, then Harask knows the name Riddle. He doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know where she is, but he knows that she has the eye. If Harask can get his hands on the eye, then Harask can find an ally to put in the eye. And if that happens, then Kai and Harask, Kai is fighting 2 time traveling wizards instead of 1. That's what is happening in these stories. It's super confusing. I know it is. Try to keep in mind what's happening here. Riddle has the eye. Kai wrote about it in a journal. He left the journal in his castle under the control, being watched by Cholava Bentek. In Gilded Mares, after years have gone by, Their bodies are starting to fail. Their bodies are no longer healing, and they just want this whole thing to be over. Harask sets the skull of Troleva Bintek in front of Kai. The person, a name he doesn't even remember because he's been gone for so long. A citadel he doesn't even remember he has because he's been gone from it from so long. And if he got that skull, then he got the journal, which means he knows the name Riddle. So, then we go to a village, and we see Kai fighting. The village is being attacked by Harask's forces. He kills a bunch of the forces, and there's still 500 men outside. He turns 400 of them into solid crystal. This is how badass Kai is. He turned 400 men into solid crystal by slamming his sword into the ground. And this is the first time that Kai and Harask meet. Harask says, "My savior," which means, my savior means you have to look at the story of the slave, where Kai cuts Harask free from his bonds and sets him free upon the world. He says, "My savior." Harask says, "I am timeless." And Kai says, "As am I." Then he says, "Jocelyn, why didn't you slit her throat and be done with it?" To Harask. And Harask says, "I never shined to murdering children." Kai says, "There's a bit of good in you. You have a flicker of compassion. I will find it in our war. I will heal your anger and cool your rage for mankind." So at this point in the story, Kai still has the idea that he can change Harask and turn Harask into a good entity that then heals the world and solves all these problems. So that's where we are in Kai's story. We're at a point where he's still filled with compassion and filled with hope. So we are to be friends then, Harask said. "I think I'd rather take my chance at killing you." And Kai says, "Never friends, but I can't give up on you just yet." And then Harask says, "I want the girl who lives in this village, give me Drellis." And Kai says, "I cannot do this. I cannot do that." He says, "This one I have won. Maybe the next battle belongs to you. Once a win has come to you, the other must find a different way." They're setting up the rules of the silent war of the Sour Eye. Harask then says, "There are rules to this silent war we fight." And Kai says, "There are." And Harask says, "You and I will not meet again." And Kai says, "I cannot guarantee that." Again, this is very early in the Silent War. So Harask does not know yet that they will get to a point where they're the only people that can talk to each other, and that they'll be meeting in the Gilded Mares every year. Harask in battle, he has an army. He rides a great bear. We know that he's 7 foot tall. He wears a brown woolen cloak. We know he fights with a fist dagger made of demon steel, which at this point doesn't exist in my world. I don't even think he has it in this book. This is the first time they meet, and they're setting up rules. And they're setting up, they're meeting for the first time. Now, after Harask leaves, Kai decides not to show himself to Drellis, who's the only living person in the city, in the village. He decides not to show himself as a white-robed, long black-haired Trimerian. Instead, he takes the shape of a man with a platinum cap on his head, with white hair. He's short. His robe colored with shimmering reds and purples, and he warped his sword into a staff with the head of an anaconda on top. Anybody who has read the book Legends of the Exiles and has read Jocelyn's story will recognize this character as the master that takes Jocelyn and Drellis to the Sentinels. That person in the book Legends of the Exiles is actually Kai. Drellis, do not fear me. I've come to aid you and make you strong. Please let yourself be seen, and I will guard you and keep you safe. We will go to a place where no enemy can find you, and I will teach you power. He's talking about taking her to the Blesses. He's going to pick up Jocelyn and take her to the Demontser. He doesn't realize what he's done. Looking for a second at the stuff that came before, you'll find that Kai talked the Demontser into going and saving Jocelyn when she was too young. He doesn't realize yet what he's done by doing that. That is one of Kai's big mistakes. Anyway, okay. That is the story, The Son of the Demontser. It's very intricate. It has so many moving parts. I don't know if you caught them all as you were watching this. It's so complicated. But I tried my best to explain to you that there are so many things that are moving in the Silent War of the Samurai. So many things you can't possibly keep track of. This is one of those sections of my work that needs to be mapped out. Flowchart. Crazy pictures and book covers and pins in the wall and strings on the wall and all that stuff. I really don't know how I'm keeping it straight myself. All that I know is that I am. And I can accept that. So I'm going to come back. I want to tell you about something that I did last week that was pretty significant. And we'll go from there. But I'm going to take a break. Okay, so it's further into the night. My eldest son has gone to school. You can see his dog, Peanut, trying to find a suitable spot on the top of the chair by making quite a comfortable nest with the with a blanket. We're gonna have to try to ignore him. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna move this blanket. Oh, it looked like he just got comfortable. Over here. Come on, Peanut. We're gonna put him behind me. We're gonna put him behind me. So as I've reached the point of the night where I've got iced coffee in the Yeti. I'm almost done with this video. So You're almost done looking at this fantastic pocket square. I guess it was a week and a day ago. I was promoting the book Normal Street, and I took little excerpts from a chapter. And this chapter was about a part of my life that went from peaceful and loving to war. War with my brother, war with my family, war with everybody in my life except Becca. It was emotionally violent. It was terrible in every way that you can imagine. And by the end of it, me and Becca had broken up. So you may have seen it on my Facebook account. If you haven't, you can go and look there. Start at the bottom. The bottom post talks about a scene in Boondock Saints, and then follow that up all the way through until you get the story. Basically, the story is about when my life was set on fire. And as my life was set on fire, her life was set on fire. And she shared all my posts and she put them on her page. And when she shared them, she wrote a little something about the post before she shared mine. But a lot of people just saw my posts and they didn't see hers. Hers had stanzas of a poem that she wrote about this particular part of her life. That poem is in the book Song of the Leviathan. I'm not good at reading poetry out loud. I'm dyslexic and I seem to never get it right. However, this poem is so important to what I posted and to our life. And my wife is a fantastic poet. And I've been talking about Song of the Leviathan for so long on this channel that I'm going to read to you the poem that she I'm going to read to you the poem that she shared on her post of the story. My suggestion is after I read this poem for you to go to my page and read the post that I left. And when you do, think about this poem that I'm about to read to you. It's called The Blow. The drums have long been home to me. It's true. It's true. They warn me my heart won't be free. It's true. It's true. So I can tell about the day I had to lock my hopes away when my future went up in flames. It's true. It's true. You never know when it will come, the blow, the blow. It's quiet and loud as a drum, the blow, the blow. But everything just falls to dust and every step is one you must march forward now. In God you trust, the blow, the blow. The children are in danger here. It's true. It's true. But no one is a stranger here. It's true. It's true. And my sweet Jessie has to go to guard the souls who really know. The devil tries to hide his show. It's true. It's true. So I stand here with bandages, in need. In need. He kneels and holds the hands of those in need. In need. I follow him, I know I should, to patch the holes and wounds I could, to hold up those who prayed for good, in need, in need. This war consumes our future plans. It's true. It's true. But who are we to make demands? It's true. It's true. For so few know the path we trod, devoid of joy or praise or laud. Our lives we lay at the feet of God. It's true. It's true. The blow is a march. It's a march into battle. And after the post that I made, I wanted to share it with you. And let you know that when I was going into my war with Grasp, we call it Guardian's War. It's war against his family to fight a child molester and try to put him behind bars while holding together two children. That story is told in the book Normal Street, Reality of the Unreal Mind, Volume 2, Normal Street. That story is told, but that poem's not in it. And that poem tells the story of the woman that kept me alive. So I really wanted to share it with you today. That's our episode for today. I know the stuff with the Blestes and the Demontser and the Flip and Drellis and Jocelyn. I know the stuff with Peter and the possibility that never was with the child of Drellis and Sabrar. I know all that was very confusing. I tried to lay it out the best that I could, but I fear that I hadn't gotten it exactly understandable. Anyway, that's the best I can do. So I'm going to call an end to this episode. Do all the things that I refuse to say, and let Benny's baseline show you to the door. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you next week.